This is Duke University.
They started as a temporary military response to sectarian violence and disorder, and today there are over 80 in mostly urban working class communities. Concrete walls are the physical evidence that conflict is not really over yet. In fact, most of what we call peace walls or interfaces in Northern Ireland are the direct result of political battles and the violence that arose from them. Yet, even with structured paramilitary violence at an end and political progress being made, the concrete walls and other so-called peace lines or interfaces remain in place and have, in fact, increased in number. They are the scars of hurt in a fretful society trying to build a better future. But they are much more than that. The logic of the walls is that we hold out against them. The walls emphasise the cultural, political and religious differences between the communities, and it is that same emphasis that allows one human being to dehumanise the other to the point where it becomes easy to hate that which you do not know, and therefore the consequences of inflicting violence are immaterial, inconsequential, or just unimportant. Any change in the territorial map is a victory for one side or the other, heightening the fear of one side over the other. A community worker friend of mine in an interface area came across a group of young children playing. There were about 4 of them, aged between 8 and 10. And they had started to throw stones over the peace wall. So he approached them and he said to them, "Who are you throwing stones at?" And they said, "Them uns over the wall." And he said, "Who are them uns?" And they said, "Just them uns over the wall." So he got them together and put them in his car and he drove the long way round to the other side of the wall. And when he got round, he pointed out what they were throwing at: an empty road. So the children were pretty shocked to find out that there was no them uns. And it is in this respect that the best that we can hope for is to manage the fear and build bigger and better walls and hope that people turn their backs on one another rather than face each other in a riot. People who have choices tend to avoid the walls and the surrounding areas, so the chances of poverty in interface areas are always greater. In the context of health and social well-being, each of the neighbourhoods with peace walls in Belfast are in the top 10% of the most socially and economically deprived electoral wards in Northern Ireland. If you live or work in the area, the impact of educational disadvantage is tangible. High unemployment, particularly youth unemployment, high levels of ill health, including mental ill health, and dependency on prescription tranquilizers and antidepressants, high rates of teen pregnancy, high rates of dental decay in children under 5, high levels of alcohol and drug misuse, and a higher incidence of crime and criminality. The impact on the individual in terms of lifetime opportunities is devastating. The impact on the community is destructive, and the impact on society is fragmented, increasing inequality, and very expensive. Population growth has impacted differently in interface areas. Whilst the Catholic nationalist community has grown, the Protestant Unionist community has declined. And inevitably, this differential in growth adds to the issues, increases pressure for housing and resources on one side, and increases fears on the other. In the early 1970s, we saw people on both sides of the religious divide fleeing burning homes or the threat of them to be with their own side to feel safe amongst their own. Housing policy has been shaped by conflict ever since. For a long time, if you applied for social housing to the Northern Ireland Housing Executive, you were asked if you wanted to live in a Protestant area or a Catholic area. It was a long time before a mixed area appeared on the housing application form. Previous experiments in mixed housing have failed, and the latest is one where residents have to sign a contract to say that they'll not put flags up, they'll not paint curbstones, or any other sort of display that might offend their neighbours. Today, 94% of our social housing in Northern Ireland is segregated along religious lines. This is most stark in areas where there are concrete walls. You'll see the slide coming around showing the segregation in Belfast. The red areas are 80 to 100% Protestant and mainly in the east of the city. The green areas are 80 to 100% Catholic and mainly in the north and west of the city. You will see in North Belfast that red and green live cheek by jowl, and that is where the greatest number of the peace walls are. A friend of mine once said that sectarianism was like a flower growing in a window box. It didn't survive on its own. It needed to be tended to. It was nurtured, watered and fed. Segregated housing in Northern Ireland provides the window boxes for sectarianism to grow. Interfaces are where fears turn into bricks and mortar. The day interfaces disappear is the day when fear is replaced by something else, and for that to happen, change has to take place both on the interfaces and far more broadly across society, and that means dealing with our past. This means facing up to and exploring what happened to us as a society, examining the bloody awful things that we did to each other and ensuring that it never happens again. People who live in or near a peace wall are those who tend to be most affected by the conflict, and the levels of trauma for them are real and ongoing. This is replicated across our society by families who have suffered the loss of a loved one or have been injured as a result of the violence. To then ask those victims to build peace by taking down walls places an undue burden on them, and that's one that society has to take on. And if there is real political will to deal with our past in a coherent and comprehensive way, along with a commitment and an action plan to build a shared future, then that provides the only effective demolition ball to take down the walls. Change on the interfaces is the single biggest indicator of change across society. It is vital that interface communities and their representatives are involved in discussions and decisions that will determine their future. The alternative is probably a worsening two-speed society, where part of society abandons any interest or any responsibility for the walls, while others live in the shadow of them every day. Change is possible, but only if the effort is shared. Thank you.
Produced by Duke University, online at duke.edu.